broke yesterday afternoon. Micah Parsons held court at the Cowboys Home Run Derby, and I thought he was pretty good. Let's start off with his DeMarcus Lawrence beef. Here's Micah explaining to the reporters what that was all about, playing out on Twitter after D-Law went to Seattle.
Man, for me, it's all about setting the tone about what the locker room is, man. We ain't going to put up with nothing. We ain't going to tolerate the dumb stuff that was going on. Like I said, it's a new regime, new culture. I'm not saying that, other guys weren't culture builders, but, some things are just tired. You know what I mean? Like, obviously, if something ain't working, it's good that you got new guys to fix it. I'm just happy that, me, CD, Dak, and, Dak kind of been through 2 generations, but just a new regime. Like, guys gonna get closer, we're gonna relate, It's just kind of hard, like, when you got a bunch of guys that are here and they're older, you know what I mean? They're more your highest paid players, and it's hard to get that relationship. But now, we've all came in together, established this relationship, we're all around the same age, and we all hang out way more.
Wow. There's so much in that.
Yeah.
Something, in Micah's opinion, was broken with the culture in the past. Said it was tired. He referenced an age gap and how that made it very difficult. I think, you think of guys like Tyron and Zach Martin and DeMarcus Lawrence, and you're not going to hang out as much. You're not going to hang out as much with some of the young guys. But what does Micah Parsons think was broken and wrong with the culture under the old regime's watch? That is the question.
Yeah, that's the reference there, which we've heard a little bit about this, and I know you've mentioned before. You've said that I guess you feel it's a little convenient, some of the fallout feedback from players that we've heard, whether it's Zach Martin or Dak or the Joneses or Micah now talking about, the culture. It's like, okay, well then why were y'all clamoring so hard publicly for him to be back last year, Mike McCarthy? If you really thought your culture was in some sort of dire straits, right, why were you arguing for running back that culture then?
Yep.
And I think that
But Micah's outlook may just be off. Like, I don't know what type of dude and leader Micah Parsons is. Micah Parsons seems all over the place, but none of you who live there every single week come back in here and going, this guy has it. He has signs of Dak-type leadership. So Micah's outlook may be wrong. D-Law's leadership may have been right. Micah's leadership may be right. I don't know.
Yeah, I think D-Law was a type of leader. D-Law, I don't think, was ever totally the hold guys accountable in the same way somebody like Dak would, or the way you'd expect Sean Lee. The leader of that defense was Jordan Lewis.
Yeah.
That was the guy who kind of, cracked heads a little bit and said, hey, you guys, let's keep things in order. Micah wants it's so odd, because usually somebody who isn't the best at it or lacks in certain areas, it's because they're so passive about it, or they don't, like when we talk about Kyler Murray doesn't want to lead the Cardinals, but he has to. He's the quarterback. He's got to do it.
Yeah.
Micah seems to die for I want people to view me that way, and it's just it hasn't.
But does he wants people to view him that way? Does he conduct himself as such in the locker room? When you duck out after you don't get a sack and you kill the Giants, that's not leadership. When you have some of the, behind the scenes moaning or diva type activities that we hear about, I don't think that that's leadership. Does Micah want the label more than he wants the role?
Yeah, I'd say it's a similar situation to Ezekiel Elliott. They reached a point where Ezekiel Elliott was one of their leaders, and I think in practice habits and different things like that, Ezekiel Elliott always was. But then there was also other points where he was clearly immature and had his issues. And not that their issues are one and the same, Micah and Zeke, but I think Micah's growing into his maturity a little bit, but he really wants to be viewed as, man, that's not only a badass football player, that's also like the guy that's Big Brother. Like he wants people to follow him. He is desperate for that. And I think it's just he's realizing it can't just be a snap of the finger, and he's got to lead a little more by example.
Yeah, my experiences with leadership, you normally don't have to seek it out and talk about it this much.
Sure.
It naturally gets attached to whoever the leader actually. You didn't hear Jordan Lewis talk about it this much. Mm-hmm. He just was.
Yeah.
So I think Micah, he's trying He's trying hard. I don't know if he's trying a little bit too hard. Why isn't the contract done? Now, yesterday, Steven said, we're disagreeing on a number. Micah thinks there's a certain number. We think there's a certain number. And apparently, in the walk-off afterwards, Jerry suggested, we have, a lot of the boxes checked, whether it's 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10. Here's Micah on getting a new contract before camp.
Extremely important. You really see a lot of players struggle when, guys aren't participating in camp and they get off to slow starts. I don't want to get off to no slow start. I want to hit the ground running and establish ourselves in this league and get some wins early in the season and be in rhythm, It's going to be extremely important for me to get going and lead these guys.
So I love that from Micah. I don't want to get off to a slow start. CD said it was a factor. I want to get in there and lead, so I want the contract to be done. Steven, I'm trying to pick through this and see if you absorbed it the same way I did. I felt like Steven yesterday may have been downplaying the absence of players during camp or when it begins. He goes, well, Nick Bosa showed up 2 days before the start of San Francisco's season.
Yeah.
They went on a long playoff run. Jerry talked about Zach missing, and he's like, we had one of our better years. I felt like, you tell me if I'm way off, Jerry and Steven were saying, if Micah misses camp or a lot of camp, I felt like they were downplaying the importance of training camp.
Yeah, and I think
the guys could hold out and be perfectly fine. They were citing certain instances. Now maybe that was just to cover them if this thing drags out. And obviously you would think would want everyone there day one, and Brian Schottenheimer does. But I found it interesting that Steven cited the instances where guys showed up late, if at all, and still had good years.
I think they have to, though. I think they have to take that position, because if they were to come out and say, yeah, look, if you're missing time, that's significant. It can hamper things. If they were to talk like that, the pressure.
Well, why? Schottenheimer did. Schottenheimer said, you need to be there. I expect you to be there.
Yeah, I think Schottenheimer's just I expect you to be there regardless of what your contract situation is. They know that's from the negotiating table. Brian Schottenheimer's not sitting on the negotiating side. From the negotiating side, they know they've got to have certain leverage points and talk about different things. If you say, if everybody comes to agreement, you missing that time is impactful in a negative way on your season, that shifts way more pressure to the Cowboys to get it done than the player, I think. Because the player at that point knows, I'm getting paid eventually anyway. Yeah, I didn't have a great personal season, but ultimately the one that gets hurt more is the Cowboys, who end up having to pay in the end anyway, and then it affects their season. So I think for Dallas, if they were to come out and say it's so critical, well, that all of a sudden puts pressure on them the night before training camp to just concede and get things done.
And then Micah Parsons last night at the Home Run Derby. A lot of this audio, of course, from the great John Machota. He will be on the G-Bag Nation today, along with Von Miller. So the Whales appearing from 2 to 7 today. We'll have Zach Wolchuk at 8 o'clock live in studio for 2 hours. Here's Micah on Jerry Jones disrespecting his agent, David Mulugheta.
Yeah, obviously, I know Jerry always comes from a good place. I think overall, Jerry's one of the better people I know. And also, my agent's one of the better people I know. So, I don't really try to get, it's like when your brother and sister are arguing. You don't really step in the middle or choose sides. You just kind of say, hey, they're coming from this perspective, you're coming from this perspective, and just find a way to meet in the middle. But, there's no hard feelings there at all.
So there's Micah being Switzerland.
Yeah, sort of. But he says, you try not to get in the middle, but you did. You went to dinner. You went to dinner with, you created the whole setup for how this became brother and sister fighting was you having that meeting, which my belief is it was a meeting that Micah initiated. And so to me, you already did do that. You did get in the middle of it. You did cause the questions to be asked. But look, Micah is, you can always talk about, is it authentic or is this just, hot air or anything like that? Micah is a fantastic quote, though, from the perspective of he's usually not going to say anything he's not going to say what D-Law did. We were burned out, man. He's not going to get caught saying something like that typically. The bigger issue for Micah is just, are you buying what he's selling? But he's almost always going to sell the right thing.